You said you lived alone here. Why bring me?
Because you needed shelter. And I needed to remember what kindness feels like.
I'm afraid of you. Everyone is.
Then let me show you why they're wrong. Don't fear me. I'll teach you how gentle love can be.
I've never known gentle.
Out here, even the wind learns to be kind.
The wind came down the mountains like a living thing, wailing through the pines and flinging needles into the whitening air. Elias Boone rode with his head bent, his beard rimed with frost, his horse breathing steam. The snow had been falling since dawn, slow and steady, burying the world in silence. He'd meant only to check his traps along the ridge before nightfall, but something in the valley pulled at him, an instinct honed by years of living where men seldom lasted a winter. He guided his roan down through the trees, boots creaking in the stirrups, eyes scanning for sign. A hare's track crossed his path, a fox's trail wove near a frozen stream, and beyond that, half hidden in the drift, the dark curve of a broken wagon wheel jutted from the snow.
Elias slowed.
The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint scent of smoke, or something burnt out long ago. He swung down, boots sinking deep, and brushed snow from the wagon side. It had been here for days, maybe longer. The canvas was torn open like claws had ripped through it. Inside, he saw the remnants of supplies scattered, a trunk burst open, a Bible half buried, a strip of lace frozen to the plank. He moved closer, hand resting on the butt of his Colt, and peered under the splintered seat. At first, he thought it was a bundle of cloth.
Then the cloth trembled.
Elias knelt, heart hammering once before falling back into its old steady rhythm. He pulled back the blanket. A woman lay there, small and pale, her hair stiff with frost. A torn veil clung to her shoulders, and a ribbon, once white, was frozen to her wrist like a shackle. Her lips were blue, her fingers bound with rope that had bitten deep into the skin.
"Ma'am."
His voice cracked through the quiet, deep and rough from disuse. Her eyelids fluttered, lashes dusted with snow. For a moment, she looked at him as if she couldn't decide whether he was real. Then her breath hitched, a small sound lost to the storm. Elias took out his knife and cut the rope, careful not to nick her skin. She didn't resist. He slid his arms beneath her and lifted. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell against his chest, and he felt the faintest whisper of breath.
"Easy now," he muttered.
"We're going home." The horse shifted as he mounted with her in his arms. The snow deepened as they climbed, branches bowing under the weight. His cabin sat tucked beneath a granite ridge, smoke long since gone cold from the chimney. He'd built it with his own hands, pine walls, stone hearth, and enough solitude to keep his ghosts company. He never thought it'd hold another living soul. When he pushed the door open, the air inside was hard with frost. He set her down on the cot near the fire pit and struck a match. The flame quivered to life, licking dry kindling until heat began to crawl into the room. He worked in silence, thawing water, setting a pot to boil, laying blankets over her. Her skin was marble cold. He rubbed her hands between his palms, watching color creep back in faint streaks. Her lips parted once, breath shallow.
"You hold on," he murmured.
"Ain't your time yet." The blizzard thickened outside, hammering at the roof. He hung her veil by the fire to dry, it looked ghostly there, fluttering in the draft. As the room warmed, the sharp smell of wet wool and pine sap filled the air. Elias poured warm water into a tin cup and dabbed her forehead with a cloth. Beneath the grime and bruising, she was young, maybe 20. There was a small cut on her cheek, and the corner of her mouth bore the mark of a man's hand. The sight of it stirred something low and old inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, anger not born of hatred but pity.
She stirred again.
Her voice came faint, the sound of someone dreaming.
"Please don't."
He leaned close, but she slipped back into unconsciousness. The wind howled outside, and the fire cracked. Elias sat beside her for hours, feeding the flame, dozing now and then. Each time he woke, he checked her breathing, his calloused hand resting near hers but never touching. When night came, the storm turned wild. Snow piled against the windows, rattled through the chimney. He cooked beans and venison, though he barely ate. His eyes kept drifting back to her, this lost creature the mountains had thrown in his path. He wondered what kind of man left a bride to die in the snow. At some point past midnight, she woke again. The light from the fire painted her face in amber and shadow. She blinked confused, then shrank back against the wall when she saw him. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "You're safe here." Her gaze darted around the room, the rifle by the door, the boots by the hearth, the traps hung like steel teeth on the wall. She trembled, clutching the blanket higher. Where am I?" "Near the Grey Elk Ridge. You were in a wagon down by the creek." She shook her head weakly.
"No, he'll come back." Elias frowned. "Who?"
Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then her eyes rolled back and she fainted again. He caught her before she hit the wall and eased her down. Her body was burning now, fever setting in. He soaked a rag in cool water and laid it across her brow. All night he fought the cold and the sickness, tending her as best he knew how. He'd patched his own wounds before, mended a horse's leg, even nursed a wounded hawk till spring, but never cared for something so fragile. Each time he looked at her, he saw not weakness but endurance. She'd clung to life when the storm would have taken a stronger soul.
By dawn, the blizzard began to ease.
A gray light seeped through the cracks in the shutters, soft as breath. The cabin smelled of smoke and broth. Elias sat in the chair by the fire, half asleep, when he heard her whisper, "Why'd you help me?"
He looked up.
Her eyes were open now, blue-gray, clear despite exhaustion. "Didn't see reason not to." "I was supposed to die out there," she murmured. "Supposed to." She turned her face toward the fire. "He said if I ran, no one would find me. Guess he was wrong." Elias said nothing. The logs popped in the grate. He reached for the pot and poured her a little broth, holding the cup steady till she could sip. "Name's Elias Boone," he said after a while. "Been up here 15 winters.
Trap hunt, keep to myself."
She studied him through the steam rising from the cup. "You live alone?"
"Always have."
Something like a smile ghosted across her face, small, broken but real. "Then you must be used to quiet."
He nodded.
"Mostly prefer it." The moment hung between them, simple, wordless, heavy with things neither could name. Outside, the snow began to drift from the roof in slow slides, falling soft as feathers. The light grew stronger, revealing the world newly born. White hills, frozen creek, pines bent under weight. Elias stood and went to the door. He opened it a crack, letting in a slice of clean air.
The storm had passed. The world was still.
When he turned back, she had fallen asleep again, the cup resting in her lap. Her breathing was steady now. He watched her a long time before crossing to the fire and stirring the embers. The veil he'd hung had dried, edges singed by the heat. He touched it once, then set it gently atop her trunk near the wall. Somewhere in his chest, beneath years of silence and snow, something shifted. Something fragile that frightened him more than any winter ever had. The day bled into evening, gold fading to blue. Elias kept the fire going and mended a trapline by lamplight, the rhythm of the work steadying him. Each small sound, the crackle of the wood, the slow rise of her breath, became part of the same fragile peace. The first dawn after the storm came gray and still, a hush that made the mountains seem carved from glass. Inside the cabin, warmth pulsed from the hearth, orange light trembling along the rough-hewn logs. Elias Boone sat at the edge of the cot, hands roughened from years of rope and wood, holding a damp cloth over the woman's brow. Her fever had broken some time before sunrise. Now she slept quietly, her breath shallow but steady, face turned toward the fire like a blossom seeking light after too long beneath snow. He had never known such quiet could make a man so aware of himself. Every sound, the sigh of the fire, the crack of timber cooling, the faint rustle when she stirred, seemed to echo through the hollows of his chest.
By noon, she opened her eyes.
The fever's glaze had gone, replaced by the fragile clarity of someone waking in a world they no longer trusted. Elias poured her water, steadied the cup to her lips.
"Easy," he said.
"You've slept near 2 days." Her fingers trembled against his wrist. "Where am I?"
"My cabin," he replied.
"High ridge above Elk Valley. You were half buried when I found you." She closed her eyes, the memory cutting through whatever mercy sleep had given. "Then you saved me." Elias said nothing. He turned back to the fire, stirring the stew that simmered low, its smell of venison and herbs filling the small room. She tried to sit up, winced, then lay back down. "What's your name?" he asked quietly.
"Clara," she whispered.
"Clara Hensley."
He nodded once, slow. "Elias Boone."
She studied him, eyes tracing the deep lines at the corners of his mouth, the the scar that climbed from his jaw to the edge of his beard. You live out here alone? Mostly, he said. World's got little use for mountain men now. But the land still listens, if you learn to hear it. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the snow shone like crushed glass under the pale sun. I thought I was going to die out there, she murmured. He told me no one would ever find me. He being your husband? Her eyes flicked to him, sharp with fear. Don't say that word. He ain't that to me. Elias looked at her for a moment, then turned away. All right. For the rest of that day, they spoke little. He tended to his traps, cut wood, mended gear, while she slept and woke and watched him move through his quiet routines. By nightfall, she could sit up long enough to sip broth. He brought her a blanket of wolf pelts and laid it across her shoulders. The days that followed settled into a rhythm the mountains themselves seemed to approve of, slow, steady, marked by work and silence. He rose before dawn, splitting kindling, checking lines, melting snow for water. She watched from the cot, sometimes dozing, sometimes following him with her eyes as though trying to memorize the sounds of survival. When her strength returned enough to stand, she tried to walk to the door but faltered. Elias caught her by the elbow, steadying her with a touch so careful it seemed he feared she might shatter. You best take it slow, he said. I can manage. Her pride was fragile but fierce, and he admired it. Over the next few days, she began helping where she could, washing dishes in melted snow, folding the pelts he'd tanned, brushing out the horse's mane. Each small act returned a piece of her dignity. He noticed she never turned her back fully to the window. Even when the sky was clear, her eyes flicked toward the tree line as though expecting something to move there. Once, when a branch snapped outside, she flinched so hard the bowl she held shattered against the floor. Elias didn't ask what she'd seen before he found her. Some truths came like storms, you could only wait them out. One evening, as twilight burned down to blue, she asked him, "Why do you live here all alone?" He didn't look up from whittling a piece of pine. The world took what it wanted from me. Figured I'd take what was left, the quiet. She watched him shave another curl of wood, his hand steady, his voice low. You don't strike me as the kind that runs. I didn't, he said. Till I had to. The silence that followed was gentle, not awkward. She smiled faintly and went back to stirring the pot over the fire. That night, they ate together for the first time. The stew was simple, but she ate like it was a feast, and he said nothing, though he caught himself smiling at the sight. When she finished, she asked in a voice almost lost to the fire's crackle, "Do you believe in kindness, Elias Boone?" He looked at her over the rim of his tin cup. "Reckon I believe in what a man can do with his hands. The rest depends on who's asking." She lowered her gaze, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The next morning, she stood outside the cabin door, wrapped in his old coat. The storm had left the world hushed and shining, the snowfields unbroken except for the line of his footprints down the slope. She breathed deep, the air burning her lungs, and for a moment she forgot the man who had left her to die. The mountains stretched out like a promise, vast, eternal, untouched. Elias came up behind her, boots crunching softly. "Ain't wise to be out without gloves," he said, handing her his. She smiled, small but real. "You watch everything, don't you? Long enough up here, you learn to." She slipped her hands into the gloves, still warm from his skin. "Feels like the first time I've been warm in years." Something in his chest shifted at her words, though he hid it behind a nod. Best keep it that way. By afternoon, she'd gathered enough strength to help with chores. Together they shoveled snow from the roof, stacked wood, fetched water from the half-frozen creek. He taught her how to tell the sky's moods, the way clouds moved before a storm, the sharpness of wind from the north. She listened, eager, soaking in the language of survival as if it were something she'd been meant to learn all along. At night, she sat by the fire while he carved. His hands moved with patience, shaping a small bird from a block of cedar. She watched the shavings curl away like ribbons. "What'll it be?" she asked softly. "Something small," he said. "Something that flies, even in storms." When he finished, he handed it to her. The bird's wings were folded, its head tilted slightly as if listening to the wind. She traced the smooth lines with her fingers. "It's beautiful." "Wood's honest," he said. "You cut too hard, it breaks. You go gentle, it keeps its shape." She looked at him then, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe people are the same." Elias didn't answer. But when she set the carving on the shelf above the hearth, he knew it would stay there long after she was gone, if she ever left. Days passed into weeks. Her color returned, laughter, shy and quiet, began to live between them. They spoke of small things, The way the wind sounded different over snow, the stubbornness of a mule he once owned, the stars that looked close enough to touch. Yet at night, when the fire dimmed and shadows crept across the floor, she sometimes sat awake, staring into the dark, lips moving soundlessly.
Elias never pressed.
Some wounds healed best in silence. One evening, the world outside turned to indigo. Elias sat by the hearth, sharpening his knife with slow rhythmic strokes, the whetstone hissing faintly with each pass. Clara was sewing a torn sleeve, humming under her breath, the tune old and soft.